Con, and welcome to the Otherworldly, the show put on by Changing Times, Changing Worlds, because once a year is not enough. So tonight we are having Starwolf, who anybody who's been following Otherworldly for years may think of him as Master of Defense Against the Dark Arts or Crystal Master, but he is also quite good with tarot cards. He's probably spent more time than I have reading in them in public. And I thought I'd done quite a well, but boy, Kathy and Starwolf have done the Ren fairs, and they help people with what do they call it? Reading and counseling. The things
Yeah,
that you
try not
get
to do the counseling bit, because in Connecticut that's a gray area.
But it's apparently something that you're allowed to say, as long as you're not
Legally, I can get away with it because I have a certificate of ordination, so it comes under the heading of pastoral counseling.
Good to know.
Yes, some of this discussion might be the legalities of reading tarot in public and how you get around certain things.
But I'm going to turn this over to Starwolf so that he can explain, share us some tips. I mean, there's a lot of tarot readers out there, but
yes. Let's start with
everybody.
Everybody
has something to teach.
Hi, I have literally been reading tarot cards for, let's see, it will soon be 52 years. Yes. I started when I was a teenager because my part-time boss at the time shoved a deck of tarot cards in my hand and a dog-eared copy of Eden Gray's Pictorial Key to the Tarot and told me to learn.
Herman?
Yep. He was very heavily in favor of the sink or swim school of metaphysical teaching. Not so much when you're invoking things, but for the practical stuff. There
are very few ways to convince somebody that it works, like than throwing them in like that and having lots of people say, wow, that was, how did you know all that?
Now imagine this. I am a somewhat shy teenage boy who has a bunch of recently healed facial scars. And I am in the literally getting shoved into this, how to describe it, being told, okay, yeah, and learn in a couple of weeks, we'll see if we can set you up to do readings once or twice. Gurk. Understand, this is a store that I was not legally capable of coming into as a customer. I could go in as an employee.
How does that work?
You had to be 18 or older to go into first the Warlock shop or then the Magical Child.
Huh. Why is that? Just strange New York law?
Strange. I think it was more Herman's survival instinct, seeing he was gay. And this was the 70s.
Oh.
Stonewall was not that long before.
I had no idea he was gay.
Oh, gods, was he.
Okay.
We'll do the history of the occult scene in New York one of these days, back in the 70s and early 80s. But right now, we'll get back to that. Yeah, so basically, I was in the basement, under the table, and not officially an employee, because then he would have had to make out paperwork. Back when I think it was like $3 an hour was minimum wage, most of which I plowed back into books and stuff.
Take it all out in stock.
Not quite, because I always made sure that I had enough to get home. It was much easier once he moved to Manhattan. It became the Magical Child, and then I didn't have to. It was very complicated to get from where we lived to where he was in Brooklyn. But as I said, I was either 14 or 15 when I did my first professional reading. And by professional, I mean somebody actually paid to have this scared kid do it. And the cards I started with, I wish I could find my copy, but it's like everything in this house, it's somewhere. Was the 007 tarot, or these days it's called the Tarot of the Witches. It's got all these cute, chubby little people on it, and it's done in a vaguely, very 60s style. And it was the deck they created for the James Bond movie, Live and Let Die. So that's where I started. Lo, these many, many years ago. Indeed, my first ones I did, I was actually just using playing cards because I didn't have, which meant all I had were the minor arcana. And because they were playing cards, I didn't know what was up or down, so I just read them all upwards, which can make for some interesting readings, but very positive ones at the same time, except when you're dealing with some of the swords, when inverted is actually the lesser of the two evils. But I've gone along. I've used several tarot decks. I mean, I found one that I was gifted. I don't remember by who. I think it was Lauren Grover. This is the Medieval Scarpani Tarot by Luigi Scarpani, produced by U.S. Game Systems Incorporated of Stamford, Connecticut. They produce most of the tarot cards, and indeed most of the playing cards you see out there. It does, however, have a very nice art. So if you're interested in doing SCA-ish readings, or you're at a Renaissance fair and you want to look more medieval, this one is, I would recommend. I would also recommend the St. Petersburg Tarot, which is done in the style of Russian icon paintings. And it's one of my favorites because the devil is Stalin.
Huh?
And if you look very closely, the devil's nipples are little faces of Lenin.
Oh my.
Yes, it is an amazingly beautiful. Sometimes I just buy tarot cards for the art. For example, this is their equivalent of the High Priestess. They call it the Popus.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm assuming it's High Priestess because it's number 2 in the order. Let's see if I can find some of the minor ones. Oh, here's 6 of Wands, for example. If you can see it, I'm going to turn the other light on, see if I can get better. No, I think that actually just made it worse. Lights in here are kind of iffy. But that is 6 of Wands. So this is one you could use if you're doing readings in the SCA or at a Renaissance fair or anything with a medieval theme. The deck I use is the one coming from this series, which was written by Piers Anthony. I know him as a hard science fiction author long before he came out with the Xanth series, or that everybody remembers him for. But this is a very special, he created his own deck for this one. It has 5 minor suits. So you have the standard, and then you have what could be basically called, well, aura is the name of the suit. Its symbol is an infinity symbol. See if I can find it here in the reference. Wands are nature. Cups are faith. Coins are trade. No, let me just double check on. There's a table in the back that allows you to create your own. So if, for example, and if you can read, is it coming through backwards? I'm sure it is.
No, it isn't.
Oh, good, because it's backwards in mine. But these correspond to the various suits. And then you see the fifth suit, the suit of art. Its element is plasma, which is, by his definition, matter in a highly energized state, not the stuff that your blood cells swim around in.
Mhm.
Its color is purple. So in my little homemade copy, the basic symbols are little infinity symbols filled in with purple colored pencils. Let's see. The way I did it was, let's see, wands were done in yellow because for me wands are air. Swords were done in red because swords are fire for me. Cups were done in blue, and coins were done in green. And the court cards were just little stick figures holding, with crowns of various levels of complexity, holding one of the obvious symbols. Let me do a quick check of we've got some stuff coming in chat. I assume you're talking about, yes, yeah, the Tarot trilogy. That, like I said, that's the one that I created my own, sitting in the student union of Southern Connecticut State College, which says how long ago that was, because it's been Southern Connecticut State University for decades. I was there when they changed it, actually.
Mm.
But I found it gives me a deeper reading, because in the case of this deck, in a normal tarot deck, cups cover feelings, emotions, spirituality, and magic. In this deck, magic and spirituality are the province of the suit of, call them lemon skates, which is just another fancy way of saying infinity symbols. And cups get to deal with feelings and emotions, all those nice watery little things that make us all squishy and sometimes rather damp. And most importantly for me, back when I was using significators, I find when reading professionally, trying to find the significator takes more time than it's actually worth. It meant that redheads got their own suit rather than being lumped into wands with the blondes, which was not fair to either hair color, because, what do you call a blonde who gets a henna rinse? Artificial intelligence?
Oh,
Yeah. Well, you might want to edit that part out. But that's where, like I said, that's where I started. What's interesting is seeing oracle cards, which are not tarot cards. They're a far more intuitive tool. And looking through my collection, I discovered I had a deck, which I was showing off earlier. It's the Ancient Egyptian Oracle, the cards of Ra-Mat. I think this was originally, there we go. And from what I understand from pre-show research, it's very rare and somewhat expensive if you want to, though I think I bought it when the bookstore was closing down or something. Let me pull this out. I can demonstrate them. It's got 3 different sets. It's got the, actually, it's got, first off, Egyptian deities. So if you work with, pre-Christian, if you're a Kemetic, you get all sorts of nice things like Nefertem and Isis. And for some reason, they call Horus air, and they have him in the mumma form. Oh, I see what it is. These are the 4 sons of Anubis.
ah,
That's why. That's not. air, earth, sorry, let me do this right. Fire. And then, let's see, we have, here's water. The ones that basically, in Old Kingdom Egypt, those would be the canopic jars that your vital bits were put in, with the exception of your heart, which they returned. Nephis, goddess of the night. Sept, who I have never heard of before, but then again, there's lots of minor Egyptian deities I've never heard of. He's got the two big feathers, so he's got something to do with royalty. Thoth, who everybody claims invented the tarot cards. At least that's what the 19th century English occultists who were kind of kit bashing the Kabbalah and what was being translated from Egyptian papyruses and certain amount of Neoplatonic thought together, rubbing the serial numbers off, applying lots of glue and a hammer, which is the best way to describe it, and basically hammering it into what became the magic of the Golden Dawn. If you look carefully, you can see the joints where they kind of made everything work. Amazingly, it does work. Though I hate to say this, if you ever really need to be put to sleep, crack the Golden Dawn's big blue doorstop and start reading. I guarantee you'll be out before you pass the 3rd chapter. But then again, it was a bunch of rich 19th century English aristocrats and semi-aristocrats playing at being ceremonial magicians. We also have Ma'at, the goddess of truth, who figures rather heavily in modern American ceremonial magic. At least one of the currents that is the OTO, Ordo Templari Orientalis, that's Crowley's people. It was basically the bastard stepchild of the Golden Dawn, and I think a little too much hashish on the part of crazy Uncle Alistair. Set, who, contrary to what lots of people think, Set is not the devil. He's not even particularly evil. Indeed, he is one of the 2 guardians of the bark of Ra, along with his nephew Horus. And it's only in certain subgroups where because you had a bunch of people who were basically Church of England, they were looking for a Christ figure, and you had that in Osiris, who died and kept coming back, like your typical vegetative god. And I know I'm wandering off of the tarot, but everybody claims the tarot has its roots in Egypt. For me, it has its roots in 15th century Italy. But so somehow, especially in popular fiction, Set got branded as the Satan analog, ignoring completely, many, many thousands of years of Egyptian religion where the top god was some form of Ra. And Osiris was just, he's around because he's the one who keeps the barley growing. But they, like I said, so this is Set. He is the god of the Western Desert, one of the primary war gods. Anubis, everybody's favorite, because we can all do the little, Anubis loves you. Sekhmet, who certain feminists keep trying to turn into this massive, vengeful female archetype. She's basically Ra's chief hit woman.
Enforcer.
Yeah. Horus, who is a far more Christ analog than Osiris ever will be. Osiris. And Ptah, who along with, was it Khunnum the pattern, basically. Oh, and we've got Ra here as well. My favorite deity. If you must have a sun god, let him be a fun god. Ra, Ra, Ra. If you can't laugh at religion, what good is it? Those are the gods. Oh, look, they've got some more gods here too. They've just changed the colors. These are the Eretz. These were the deities. These are the, I'm just going to go straight into the book. Excuse me, I've never actually used this thing. You have the deities, and then you have the pylons, with Ra being the first pylon, even though he was kind of the top deity for most of it. And then you have, not appears to turn up twice. And then you have what is called the ARIT, Ert, things of a material nature. And finally, yep, sorry, the white cards were the deities. They did the pylons first. Okay, and if you are, like I said, if you are of an Egyptian or Kemetic bent in your divination, I'm going to be experimenting with these over the next few weeks and see what I can come up with. These are very useful. Stick everything back in the box so it doesn't disappear on me. But as I said, I am primarily a tarot reader. Kathy does a lot with oracle cards. Indeed, she has so many, I keep threatening to buy her one of those big rolling toolboxes you see in a garage for her to store them in, and we'll just unload the thing and roll it into the tent when we're working. Let's see, other things I use. Something I picked up at a psychic fair called Connecticut Paracon. This is the, which I have been experimenting with, this is the Black Cat Oracle cards. There are considerably fewer of them. I like them just because they have, well, they've got kitties on them. And I'm finding I don't so much use the book as just, use this as intuition. Because that's really all any divination tool, whether it is runes, of which I do a daily rune reading if you've ever seen either our page or my page. This is an inexpensive set of rune cards that I picked up at, of all things, below 5. They're interesting, and this is the one that keeps coming up a lot lately, the Web of Weird. I know it doesn't exist in classic rune reading, but this is the 21st century. But to get back to tarot cards, showing you all the stuff I had just to grab immediately. As far as I know, the history of tarot goes back to the Italian Renaissance.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't really used them other than doing like a daily pull from them, and doing a 3-card pull and see what comes up. Part of it is I haven't gotten, in my opinion, good enough yet. I've been doing, said tarot for 50 years and runes for about 20, so I think I know a little bit of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about those. And one of the things you will discover if you become a tarot reader or if you do tarot readings is people give you decks.
Yes, they do.
It becomes I think it sometimes becomes the default gift. Oh, we don't know what to get her. Get him. Oh, get her. They read tarot cards. Get her a card. Get her a deck. Or I found this in Mom's drawer when we were cleaning the cleaning out her house after either A, she died, or B, they moved her to a some form of smaller living quarters, and they didn't tell her that they pulled it out, and they hand it off to you. Some of which I have, after basically smudging them to make sure, just basically hand it off to somebody else who's learning. The disadvantage with that is a lot of times the cards themselves, the book, especially with given ones, the book is missing. So, and some of them with the art, figuring out what the cards are can be a bit of a pain. There are a couple of good ones that have, for example, the Aquarian Tarot has a book, not just the little instruction book you find in the box, but it actually had an entire book devoted to it with deeper meanings than the 2 or 3 lines you get on a small page in a little throwaway paperback that you find in the box. There is a good beginner's tarot that I like for starting people. It's one of the ones where you have the meanings printed on the top and bottom. It's very much a beginner's deck, but it's a good one for that because it means you can start them doing, trial readings, whether it's a 3-card yes/no spread or the full Celtic Cross Tree of Life spread, which is the single most common tarot spread out there. That one goes straight back to Eden Gray, who was one of the contemporaries of Wyatt and Ryder, and I forget the name of the female artist who actually created them.
Pamela Coleman Smith.
Thank you. Yeah, I know it's not really Celtic, but that's what they've called. It's been called that for at least 123 years. That's the easy, and likewise, the vertical piece has nothing to do with the actual tree of, say, Kabbalistic tree of life. I've done occasional actual tree of life spreads because I have friends who are Kabbalists and, as I said, members of the OTO, and they're very into that. And it's more memorization than I'm really up for these days at this point in my life. Memorizing the 32 runes of the Anglo-Frisian Firth was about as far as I'm ready to go. But like I said, I would suggest with a beginner, start with the Rider-Waite or one of its easier to understand variants. There are a few decks that I wouldn't hand to a beginner on a bet. One of them being the Mother Peace Tarot, simply because it's got very little to do with it's its own critter. It calls itself a tarot deck, but I think it is probably the first set of oracle cards. So for that matter, the Swedish cards, the way Jane reads them, or the Gypsy Witch fortune-telling cards, I think those are both. Well, the Gypsy Witch is definitely the descendant of Lenormand cards,
Yeah,
which
definitely.
are kind of a transition, as I see it, between tarot and the modern oracle decks you see filling the pages of occult catalogs. There's practically an oracle deck for any culture or any anything else you want. But I would not use the Mother Peace Tarot simply because, one, it's circular, so telling what's up and down gets a little interesting. And two, it is very, very feminist separatist. I found I have that and a copy of Crowley's Book of Thoth, which the art is great, but a lot of people get terrified of it because, oh no, it's Aleister Crowley. Well, I wouldn't eat a curry that the man made. Well, he had a habit of making them very spicy. But I have that, the Mother Peace, and the Book of Thoth, both of which I were gifted, are locked up in a steel ammo can down in the basement. under under what is effectively maximum security. I figure let them chew on each other. I mean, one of these days, I'm sure the can will explode and something will come crawling out. But okay, exactly. See what survives, which I'm looking forward to with both anticipation and a certain amount of trepidation, if you think about it. It's the whole, okay, what's coming out when everything is done chewing on each other? Excuse me, quick check of the chat room. Come on. No, I actually have various copies of Necronomicon. One of the things I do teach is the Practical Necronomicon, which deals with all the various Necronomicon variants that have been published since the 60s, starting with the Hall edition, which I have, which is a photocopied from a friend's book, all the way through the Simon edition, including the Necronomicon Tarot, by the way, through the Donald Tyson? Yeah, I think it was Donald Tyson did a Necronomicon as well. And he also did a faux biography of Abdul al-Hazred, which is really interesting. But that, once again, is those are stories for another day. And being part of the crew at the Magical Child, which brought out one of the more famous versions, the Simon iteration, I think which was first sold at the Magical Child and indeed was published by what is now the Magical Child Publishing Company. It's the only portion of the company that's still around. But indeed, if I remember, I'll bring my copy, which, if I remember correctly, has an autograph, which says how long ago that was. But excuse me, I'm wandering. To get back to tarot, let's get into a little bit on reading in public. Okay, reading in public is, a lot of readers find it difficult to read under the sort of conditions that Kathy and I both do readings under, which is big psychic fairs, SCA events. I'll say this, the SCA breeds very resilient, adaptable fortune tellers. The Soothsayers Guild does that. I mean, if you're doing a reading and 20 yards away, the final melee of a tourney is happening, and you learn to ignore the sound of a woodlot being blown into a sheet metal factory, which is a good description of Belfar's Challenge, that last battle where everybody is smashing together. But I know lots of readers who say, oh, I can't read under this condition, I can't read under that. I can read under any condition where my cards don't either get A, soaked, or B, blown away along with me.
But catching fire.
That's never happened.
That happened to me.
I
had the crystal ball on the table as eye wash.
Oh.
And when the card burst into flame, the poor kid said, "Oh my God, what does that mean?" And I said, "It means
gotta cover the damn crystal ball."
I said, "I put the crystal ball in the wrong place."
Yeah, that is the only. Yeah, I have never had that happen. I have had
too
to deal
smart
with.
You probably noticed if that little white spot appeared on the card.
Yeah, well, you'll notice if you've seen my table decorations, there is nothing that is going to magnify the sun in it. Because also, I'm very leery about just putting crystals out on the table if I'm working outside, because a hot and strong enough sun can get the crystal vibrating to the point where it'll shatter along any internal flaw lines. Having seen crystals that were in people's windows do exactly that. Quartz crystals are amazing things. You heat them up, they start to or apply electricity, they start to vibrate. And heat and electricity aren't that different. And once they start to vibrate, if there's any kind of internal flaw, they're going to go to glory. Do you really want to be around when, say, a fist-sized quartz crystal suddenly decides, hi, I'm about to self-destruct? Plus the concept of maybe setting the table on fire. But one of the things you have to learn when you're dealing with the public, especially, is there are expectations. Having, the most common one is the one I do not need my cards or my runes or a pendulum to give the answer to, and that is he going to leave his wife for me? And the answer is no.
Always.
I give the person their money back, and I send them along to somebody who has slightly less ethics than I do. Skeptics are fun because they're crunchy and good with ketchup. Usually, especially because when I start telling them stuff that there's no way I could know what happened, and I avoid doing he by water or near a tree, which is the standard bogus psychics cold read system. I don't do that. Among other things, I have a habit of not letting them tell me the question if they have a specific question. Because, face it, the deck I've been using for over 40 years. If I know the question, I can probably force the answer out of the deck that you want as opposed to the one you need. What I usually do is I tell them to, while I'm shuffling, and most importantly, when you cut the cards, which is my usual not so subtle way of finding out if people actually know how to cut a deck of cards, because I know people who play poker by the hour, but they've never physically handled a deck of cards because they only play it on the computer.
Oh,
where
that's
the computer does all the yeah, it's depressing, but that's welcome to the 21st century. But it's a quick way, and if they look at me with the "you want me to do what?" I show them quickly how to cut cards, and then I go back to shuffling. And that way, it keeps me honest. It keeps the cards as honest as possible. And no, I do not purify the cards after every reading. Mostly, it is a case of the very act of shuffling, which is kind of like hitting the reinitialize button on a computer, because as you are re-randomizing the stack, that takes care of anything truly negative. Plus, I don't let people shuffle the cards, one, because they are 40 years old and somewhat flimsy. They were flimsy to begin with, and they've gotten worse over the 40 years that I've used them. And because, face it, if you're at a Renaissance fair, there could be sticky stuff, grease, booze on their hands. I've had people literally sit down that needed help to stand up again because they'd had one mead too many. Or one Ugg Shutter Bud Light too many.
Whatever pig swill they're selling at the fair.
The advantage of the fair we work at now is they have relatively high quality booze. But the idea is, I work on the idea that I can do a reading under, like I said, practically any condition available. I mean, I could even have given a reading to the amazing Randy, and even though he would have denied it, he would have probably had that kind of gurk look on his face when I was done.
No, he would have said that you were reading his body language or had somebody in the audience.
Yeah.
Randy was very annoying.
Yes, he was. He was a fairly good stage magician, and the problem was he assumed everybody else was as crooked as he was. Typical con artist.
If it can be faked, it must have been faked.
Exactly, because if there's anything else out there bigger than he is, he terrified him. But let's also think something I found with the hardcore militant atheists of the Dawkins Hitchens school of atheism. They see God every time they look in the mirror, and not in the good way. But back to tarot. If you can have a quiet place to work, that's good. I have a semi-quiet place because I am working with another reader. So it really gets fun when both of our tables are full and we're trying to do readings on top of each other, but we manage. I mean, we've only been doing this together for 22 years publicly at Ren fairs, and add another 10 years for doing readings in the SCA. Quick time check.
We're fine. You got the quarter of an hour.
Yeah, I can continue to ramble on.
Well, I'm hoping that you'll tell us more interesting stories of your experiences. Aside from he's not going to leave his wife.
I'm going to give you one of my favorites. This was at a little sunk without a trace Renaissance fair up in Hubbardston, Connecticut. Or I'm sorry, Hubbardston, Massachusetts. That was at a farm, and you could tell that a few weeks earlier it had been somebody's field because there were still the plow marks in the dirt. And we got a tour group from a summer camp. And thankfully we have rates for teenagers. So, it's not going to be a case of some 15-year-old is going to come up with $20 or $25, depending on the site, to get a reading. All they need is 10, and that's a lot easier. So somebody sits down, they hand me the $10. I start shuffling, and let's see, she got the High Priestess, and let's see, the Hanged Man, and the Sphinx, and the Vision card, and I think there was also the Lightning Struck Tower in there too. And when I finish, I look up and I'm looking into these emerald green eyes, and the little "Hi, I am" tagged on her shirt said Morgan. So I get a funny feeling because she had that black hair and milk pale skin that you only get in certain parts of Ireland, that it was perhaps more appropriately pronounced Morrigan. This was back before the Morrigan became a very popular deity. So this would have been, oh gods, early part, first decade of this century. God, I can say that now, can't I? That was one of my that and one I did at an SCA event where the gentleman, he got every bad card he could. He got, for example, he got the Queen of Cups reversed, which is an unfaithful woman. He got Two of Swords reversed, which is sickness. He got Lightning Struck Tower. He got the Death card. He got the Devil. I mean, I couldn't have, even if I was a Vegas level card mechanic, I couldn't have given a worse reading than that. And this was over on Long Island at one of the Andabagine events we were going to at that point. And when I run into him 6 months later at Penzic, he's bald from the chemotherapy. His mother died. His wife cheated on and left him. And as I said, chemotherapy, he had just finished a series of chemo and radiation for cancer. And what he said was, I did that just for entertainment, and I'm really glad you did, because I was kind of subconsciously ready for everything that happened. That admittedly was one of the more terrifying readings, because it's like, that's, like I said, that's the sort of reading you have to be very, very careful about when you are giving it, because there isn't much more death, doom, and disaster. Oh, there was also the 10 of Swords in it, which can mean that's another one of doom, gloom, and disaster. Like I said, he got about every bad card you could get in the appropriate positions. On the other hand, there was the girl who got the lovers crossed by the devil, and it turned out, oh boy, good. She was intensely, she had some interesting tastes, because this is going to be, I'm assuming, a family-friendly transmission. So when she found out that, it was like, oh, good. She was very, very happy. Only time that combination has ever had somebody go, oh, yes. Let's see, other weird ones. Well, let's see, there's been the odd encounter with various evangelicals who would show up at big public events. Like we did one on the Brantford Green, which was also it was a big demo that we did, and it lasted, like from noon to, we all went back to somebody's house at about 8 o'clock that night to have a final party. And this lady and her son were coming up, and she was clutching her Bible with that kind of, that reflexive, I'm doing the motion here that you do when you're holding something that you think is your only defense against the total damnation of your soul, and you're terrified. Oh God, she was okay. She was kind of the quiet little mouse, but her son was, picked up one of the stuffies off my table and said, well, what if I throw this on the ground? Am I going to summon a demon? No, but it will summon a policeman. Why, Pete? That being the other thing, reassuring your clients as to the reading is not engraved in stone. It is scratched in cream cheese. They have free, well, just what I'm giving is the most probable reading if they do absolutely nothing after they get up from the table. Heisenberg is a force in the universe. The very act of getting the reading kind of changes the outcome. There is no God but Murphy, and Heisenberg is his prophet. But basically, the one that really gives a lot of people shock, and I have to reassure them, is the death card, because there is no actual card of physical death in any tarot deck I have ever picked up. Unless you have some special deal with the universe, death is inevitable. That's going to happen. It's the death of old ideas, old concepts, old outworn ways of thinking about things and doing things. It's the same as the lightning struck tower. It's just the magnitude and how the change happens. The lightning struck tower is slowly peeling the Band-Aid off. The death card is ripping it off. And give me a second to check my references in the Tarot Trilogy, the six of art is you're doing the dishes and the Band-Aid soaks loose and floats away. That is subtle, painless change. It's nice to have that one, because
Yes.
because the other possibilities are, the lightning struck tower, your life is taken down to the foundations to allow you to build again, because there are so many things in your life that you do not need anymore.
Another question I did want to ask you, that any special cards, I personally like the Happy Squirrel, because it allows you to have something that looks so innocent and sweet and will really mess up your life. But also making your own tarot cards. My second set of tarot cards had the one little red pinstripe, and the rest were all the little blue pinstripes, because it was an index cards.
Yeah. I'm going to be making a new copy of the Tarot of the Animation to supplement and not replace the commercial deck that I've got, because I have a second copy of the commercial deck, which means if it ever truly wears out, I can start all over again. I've got one. but this is going to be for special readings, and mine contains, when I do it, there are 28 major trumps in the tarot of the animation. In mine, there are 30 because it contains 2 more that are kind of a pair of opposites. One, there is the Phoenix, which is rebirth. I mentioned that earlier. And the other one is the Fire Dragon, which is something I picked up out of a Star Trek novel, which boils down to don't bother worrying about your next incarnation. The universe isn't giving you one. Basically, get your affairs in order, or when you pass, they're just going to hit the bye, the powers that be, as it were. So those are the 2 special ones in mind, which is why I'm probably never going to use that one at Renaissance Fair, because I don't want to terrify somebody. Too many readers I know get off on scaring people. There was at one psychic, well, it was a once-a-month psychic fair over in Norwich. The astrologer there took great joy in telling people all the bad things that were in their charts as opposed to the positive things. And I've always found that that's a straight, hi, I'm going to scare you to give myself power, because scared people are easy to control, which is a quote right from Neverending Story. So yeah, people are scared of psychics because they see us mostly because I think they're afraid we're going to see their dirty little secrets.
Mm-hmm.
And in some cases, yes, we do. In other cases, I do my best to ignore them because I don't need that in my life. I do not volunteer to help the police because inevitably the psychic is the first suspect, and I don't feel like having to deal with that in my life. No police have ever called me, and I doubt if they ever will, even though once or twice I have given out business cards. That being another thing, in interactions with the police, certain states, notably New York State, it is illegal to claim to have psychic abilities. The trick around that is you have in tiny letters at the bottom of your sign, for entertainment purposes only. Doesn't matter if they're only a half an inch tall and you can't, they look like a border along the bottom. That covers you. Massachusetts, pretty much the same thing. There they have really strange laws that go back, I think they're anti-gypsy laws, because in Massachusetts, you cannot give psychic readings of any kind without a license. You cannot get the license unless you have lived in the town in which you are applying for it for at least 12 months. And the way you get around that is you get an entertainer's license, or the shop or the fair you're working at gets the license. That's some of the problems I have with a certain fair in Massachusetts. They hold the license and they treat their psychics like they run basically a psychic sweatshop. But as far as, yeah, well, once again, people being freaked out by psychics it's good movie, face it. I do not exactly, my life is not exactly a gay mad whirl of doing things in the psychic world. Well, yeah, well, back when I was working for Herman it was, but that was a different kettle of fish. Exactly, common fears. But I define myself as I am the marketplace soothsayer. I'm the person sitting in a shady corner of the what was it called? The Flavian Emporium in Rome, giving readings to the daughters of middle and upper class Romans, because not only did the Romans invent the shopping mall, they invented mall rats. Basically, they also invented the tourist industry.
Oh, we're getting close to the end. Does anybody got any questions? I have to
Mhm.
say, I'm loving these stories.
Well, you do it long enough, you have you pick up stuff.
Well, Griffin
Understand
has something.
most of the readings I've done, I flush out of my head within a few minutes unless they have something notable. That young lady is one of them. The guy, Marco, suddenly remembered his name,
Ah,
who basically had everything go wrong in his life in a year, is another one. The friend I gave a reading for, and there was a blonde or brown-haired, blue-eyed man in her future. He said, "I don't know anybody like that." And when she came back to the fair the next week, she said, I totally forgot about him, and we've already been on our first 2 dates. Oops. Sometimes the job is just poking somebody until they do what they need to do or confirm what they already know. I sometimes define it as being in the confirmation business. People come to me because they already have some idea of what's going on, and they just want to know, am I right or am I delusional? And in this case, 9 times out of 10, I can tell them, yes, you're right, or nope, this is not going to happen. Try again. Usually the it ain't going to happen, try again is in the one of the big 3, which is romance, because people are attracted to the wrong man, the wrong woman, the wrong sheep.
So, yeah. So what would you give as your last piece of advice for people who are ready to go out and try being in a psychic fair? Or
First and foremost, learn your cards. Learn at least the basic meanings of every card in your deck. Nothing makes all of us look unprofessional more than somebody flipping through their cheat sheet or their book to come up with the meanings. There are certain divination systems, like say the I Ching or various bone throwing oracles from Central Asia, where yes, you do work from a book, you do work from a scroll that has all the meanings on it. There's a big difference between that and going, give me a moment, 7 of Swords, reverse, what does that mean? Learn the basics. If you have to, take a pen and annotate your cards. That looks way better than working from a cheat sheet. Even if it's a simple 1-word mnemonic on the top and the bottom that will trigger, a stream of consciousness. That make sense?
it does.
Yeah.
And remember that your intuition, you should apply that to the cards and not just the rote meaning out of the book either.
Yes, but
Think about the combinations of cards and what they mean together.
Beginners have to start somewheres, and if you immediately throw them into the intuitive sea,
Well, okay.
they're going to drown. As I almost did 50 plus years ago.
okay, well, then this is where we all say thank you.
You're welcome.
And
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, that was
we will and I'm going to say see you around in a couple of weeks, because I'm off to Penzic, and
So we are not having
Feather Stitch is going to do it.
In.
I am throwing her to the wolves the way Herman did. Be kind to her.
I'll try. I will try. Enjoy Penzic. I both pity and envy you, because it being Penzic 50, it's going to be interesting.
It's going to be Penzic 90s. That's going to be
too. That too.
The heat indexes. I'm just hoping we don't get a dome. Anyway, so I should hit the
Close out the show and stop the recording.
There we go. I'm stopping the recording.